SBGU number 2, Customers for Life, How to Turn That One-Time Buyer into a Lifetime Customer, by Carl Sewell. Chapter 14, The Customer Isn't Always Right. You've heard the old saying 1,000 times, the customer is always right, and I think that's true, most of the time. If the customer is unhappy with something we've done, we'll ask him what's wrong and fix it for free, almost always. But is the customer always and absolutely right no matter what? No. What causes exceptions? Often it is a question of fairness, and sometimes the amount of money involved can also make a difference. When the amounts are small, the customer is always right. Stu Leonard, who runs the world's largest dairy store, tells a wonderful story about a woman who bought 2 pounds of filet mignon from him when he was selling filets for $10.98 a pound. The next week he put steaks on sale and filet mignon cost $8.98 a pound. The woman came back in and demanded that he give her the $4 that she would have saved if she had waited a week. He gave her the $4, and I would have too. But for $1,000, that's a different matter, isn't it? When people tell stories about the customer always being right, the amount of money involved is always pretty small. We hear about Stu Leonard's or maybe McDonald's where they'll automatically replace your order if you're unhappy, but the stories always involve inexpensive products. Up to $500, we're probably not going to argue with anybody, but beyond that, it gets into a judgment area. Let me give you a couple of examples. There was a man who brought in his car for service and left in the trunk a bag of quail he had shot. He says, "I told my service advisor, Rusty, he could have the quail." Rusty says he'd never mentioned the quail to me. I knew the car was going to be here for 2 weeks while the customer went on vacation. If I'd have known there was quail in it, I would have known enough to get them out. Now, during those 2 weeks, the quail fermented and exploded, and the overpowering smell permeated the entire car. While we were able to pick up the pieces, the quail odor wouldn't come out, no matter what we did. Author's sidebar. If you want to keep their business, give customers exactly what they ask for, or even more, without any hesitation. If you do anything less, you might as well offer them nothing, because you have lost their goodwill. End of sidebar. There was no doubt in my mind that the customer was wrong, that he had never mentioned anything about the quail being there. But because he was convinced he was right, and he had been doing business with us for a long time, we bought the car back from him. We sold it to a wholesaler, a used car broker who sells only to other dealers, who thought he had a way to take care of the problem. It's okay, up to a certain point, to let a customer take advantage of you, and that happens upon occasion. Not often, fortunately. Virtually all of our customers are as wonderful as they can be, but it does happen. For instance, case number 1. A customer claims he left a tennis racket in the car when he dropped it off for service and now it's not there. I know our service guys are really not into tennis. Still, we brought him another racket. Case number 2. I remember about 25 years ago when Gaunt shirts were $6.50. A stockbroker said he had been in and torn the Gaunt shirt on something, and he sent us a bill for $65. We paid it. There was a guy who did something like that nationally. He wrote to lots of dealerships saying he ripped the shirt while he was looking at a car, adding that people in the dealership were very rude to him when he mentioned it. He went on to say how he knew the dealer really wouldn't condone such a thing, and while it was no big deal, the shirt cost $35, and he thought the owner would like to know what happened. He mailed that letter to every Cadillac dealer in the country, and he made a bunch of money by taking advantage of the dealer's desire to please their customers. Case number 3. Then there are customers who say the coins they keep to pay tolls for the highway were stolen, or a new sports jacket is missing from the trunk, or that the grease on our driveway ruined a new pair of shoes. In each case, we write them a check. It's the cost of doing business, and we budget accordingly. Can we get cheated? Yes. Do we mind getting cheated a little bit? No. There is a percentage of people in the world who are just made like that. They feel they win if they take advantage of us. We can get cynical over time, but we have to fight against it because 99% are just as honest as they can be. They truly believe a tennis racket was in the trunk when they left the car off for service, even though they made 5 stops before they saw us, a couple afterward, and didn't realize the racket was missing until they got home. If we start trying to figure out who's lying to us, invariably we'll guess wrong and alienate a good customer. We're far better off assuming that if a customer tells us he has a problem, he really does have a problem. In dealing with an unhappy customer, the question becomes, what really is the right thing to do? In Minding the Store, Stanley Marcus of Neiman Marcus said if you want to keep their business, give customers all of what they ask for without equivocation or quibble. If you bargain with them, you're going to lose their goodwill. If you tell us the shirt you ripped costs $100 and we say, we're awful sorry, and write you a check for $100, then everything is fine. But if the customer says it's a $100 shirt and we say, you've had that shirt for a little while, there's probably some depreciation, so why don't we give you $50, then there's trouble. If we pay $50, we might as well have done nothing, because we've lost the customer's goodwill by arguing over what the shirt was worth. Stanley tells a wonderful story that happened when he first started working at the store. A woman bought a ball gown fashioned of handmade lace. She took it home, wore it once, and in Stanley's words, clearly abused it. It looked like she had wrestled in it. Then she brought it back to Neiman Marcus and said she wanted her money back. Stanley gave it to her, cheerfully, reasoning that it would cost a lot more to replace the customer than the $175. Remember, this was 1932. The dress would cost him. He was right. Over the years, Stanley writes, this woman spent $500,000 with us. Once I read that in Stanley's book, it made my life a lot easier. Instead of getting uptight about what is a fair deal, we, like Stanley Marcus, take a long-term view of the value of a customer. If the amount is less than $500, the department manager has the authority to make the adjustment. Anything larger should be approved by the general manager. The goal should always be to do whatever it takes to keep the customer coming back. Now, when someone is trying to take extreme advantage of you, then you have to evaluate whether it's worth it. If a customer buys a car from us, takes it home, and shows it to her husband who says, I hate green, I really want it blue, take it back. We will exchange the green car for a blue one. But if she buys a car from us and then 10 days later finds out she could have bought the car for $250 less someplace else, the answer is going to be no. She can't bring it back. She made a deal, and that's the deal we're going to stick with. Every once in a while, you come across a customer who is just impossible. Maybe it's a man who sexually harasses a saleswoman, or is constantly abusive to his employees, or finds fault with absolutely everything we do. In those kinds of cases, we have to say, we're sorry, but maybe you'd be happier doing business somewhere else. It takes a lot to get me to that point. It happens about once a year, but when I reach it, I have no problem suggesting that they buy somewhere else. Sometimes we even give them directions to our favorite competitor. End of chapter checklist. Number 1, the customer is always right up to a point. Your job is to figure out what that point is. We stretch pretty far to decide in the customer's favor. You should too. It's profitable. Number 2, be taken advantage of with a smile. If you decided to give the customer what he wants, give in completely and cheerfully. Don't haggle over the amount, and don't roll your eyes or be sarcastic. If you are anything less than cheerful, it will cost you all the goodwill you were trying to gain. And number 3, customers are good. If a customer tells you he has a problem, the chances are 99 out of 100 he really does. Don't let the other 1% make you mistreat everyone else.